Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Creo Illustrate 12.0 What's New presentation. I'm Jeffrey Kuhn. I'm the Director of Product Management for Visualization, which includes Creo Illustrate. And today, we're going to be going over all the new things that were just released this past month. So with that, we will go ahead and dive right in. So first up is just a quick agenda. I'm not going to read through this because we'll be going through each one of these in a bit more detail as we progress through the presentation. But this is just to give you an idea of some of the things that we'll be talking about. So first up is support for in-figure item list cross-highlighting. So in 11.1, we released the ability to have an embedded item list within the figure. However, we didn't quite have enough time to enable the cross-selection highlighting between the table and geometries. So with 12.0, we've closed that gap. You're now able to do cross-selection highlighting in both a 3D and a 2D figure, so that it makes it a bit easier to identify what it is you're exactly talking about. I'm going to give a demo of this in just a second, but to go along with that, we have added the item list support in 2D figures. So this is the bottom panel item list that you're seeing across the bottom has now been added into 2D figures. It's still not possible just yet to create that item list in a 2D figure. That's something that we still need to add. But if you've converted a 3D figure over to 2D, that item list will now come along with it. And to show how these two features work, we're going to go ahead and jump into Creo Illustrate. Now, for those that aren't aware of how to add an item list, basically it's part of your page definition. And so if I want to do that, I'll go ahead and, in essence, start one from scratch. I'm going to go into my options, illustration. In this case, I'm going to go into 3D page, and I'm going to add a new page, and we'll just call it test. But one of the things we can define now is the item list itself. So if I want to include an item list on this page definition, I can do that. I can also choose a location, and I'm going to choose the upper right corner. And I can do other things like, do I want it to just fit the content, or do I want a fixed width, a bit more standardization? How do I want the row heights to be, margins, content? I can even choose which columns I want to be in that table. And if I only want to include items with callouts, I can also show or not dividing lines between the individual table rows. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. And then we've got things to help with like justification of the header and the context and that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and click OK and OK. So now if I go down here and I turn this on, well, you're not seeing anything. But if you were noticing, this item list button now illuminates. And I can now turn that table on and off. And what's new for 12.0 is the ability to do highlighting across those components. And so no matter how I select it, it's going to cross highlight. And if we go down here to the item list in the 3D pane, you can see that it's also responding down here in the bottom as well. And if I select something here, all the places that are talking about that particular item will highlight. Now, in addition to that, we have added that into the 2D space. So I'll go ahead and create a new 2D figure. You can see it's already showing that item list. We'll let that process for just a moment. And again, we have that cross-selection highlighting going on. And as you can see, we also have the item list table down here at the bottom. And so that's a quick demonstration of those two particular capabilities. So now we'll jump back to the slide deck. We'll move on to the next one. this is another requested feature, option to always show the inset focus border. So normally in Creo Illustrate, if you were to set an inset view, even if it has like this ring, if that view rotates out of view of the primary camera, then that focus ring would disappear. It's part of the technique to show that what you're looking at can't actually be seen at the moment. Well, we got requests to be able to control whether or not that happens. So we have added in this toggle. So in the template for the inset view itself, you now have the ability to specify, do you want to hide it when it's obscured or allow the focus to persist? And as you can see, not only does the focus persist, but it also keeps the line solid so that it doesn't change any of the visible properties of that. It's pretty straightforward capability. I'll give a quick example of that. In this view, you can see here I've got this focus ring. And if I rotate that out of view, you can see it disappears. But if I go into properties and I uncheck that box, and now I rotate it out of view, it always persists. So that's what that particular feature is all about. Now, next up is we've added some more capability into the text handling capabilities or text authoring. So we had added in a previous release the ability to bold and italicize and do bullet points and have a header text and that kind of thing. So with this particular release, we have added in the ability to align the block of text. This is not per individual line yet. That kind of thing is off in the future. But now you can choose, left, right, center so that the text itself aligns how you want it to in that block. And it pretty much does exactly what it sounds like. So if I go in here and pick a call out that I can edit, let's say I just add a call out here. I'm going to add something. So, let me actually double click that. You can now see that I have the ability to add things. And I can add multiple lines. But then I can also choose where that falls within that callout style. So that is that one. And feel free to ask questions, preferably in the QA box in the user interface. And I will be happy to address those as we go along. So this next one is for 2D figures again. This is the ability to copy and paste geometry within the same figure or across multiple figures. But it's not just the geometry itself that gets copied. It will also copy the metadata that is associated with it. Is it a group? Does the group have a name? All of those kinds of things. So with that, we will jump into our 2D figure, and I will just go in here and select some stuff. And I'm just going to do a Control-C and come over here and create a new blank 2D figure, or the figure could already have stuff in it. In this case, I'm just going to do a blank one, and I'm going to paste. And you can see that the layer information is retained, the structure is retained, all of that kind of thing, the callouts that were copied over. All of the information associated with those geometries is copied over, not just the geometries itself. So, and if you had, particular colors and whatnot associated with it, that would have also come over as well. All right, next up, the ability to add callouts pointing to multiple items in a 2D figure. So this one is just like it sounds. Prior to this, you were able to apply a callout, but you weren't necessarily able to associate a single callout to multiple parts or multiple points within that 2D figure. So this now allows you to do that. So I'm going to go back to this one, and I'll just get rid of that callout, and we'll focus in on this area here. So the way this works is you have this multi-lead callout now. So I can go ahead and turn that on. And now if I apply a callout, which I need to create one first. So we will add one. We want this to work with 2D figures. And we want this to be editable. So click OK and OK. And now we have a callout. So you notice this little callout box that shows up over here. So what will happen now is if I select on this and drag out, I get the first one, but I'm not holding any mouse buttons at the moment. But you see I've got a new dragger that's already attached. And so I can just go and click and click and click and click and so on. So it associates it to that particular part, and it anchors it wherever it was I clicked. And then when I'm done, I can click OK. If I want to edit the callout itself, I can do this and make adjustments as to what it says and all of that kind of stuff. But I also have a callout ribbon with a bunch of tools on it now. So to get that dialog back, I can go ahead and click that edit tool. It gives me this, and I can do multiple things with this. I can add more parts. I can remove parts. I can even just go through and say, well, I don't want these leader lines actually showing up, except for one, but it's still associated. It looks like I missed an anchor point on this particular one. But it allows you to set up whatever you want. And if I go in and edit this, it doesn't even need to be something that was part of the original set. I can add more parts as I choose to that particular grouping or that call out. So that is that particular capability. It looks like we have a question. Aha. As a percentage, how close do you feel Creo Illustrate is to replacing Arbortext IsoDraw functionality, especially around 3D CAD process? Is there a target date for full replacement? That particular question is, I'm kind of leaving that up to you, because everybody uses a different level of capability, whether it's in IsoDraw or Creo Illustrate or Microsoft Office or Excel or whatever it is. So in that context, what I can tell you, and it's not in the slide deck, but I'll offer this up. Inside of Creo Illustrate 12.0, there is the ability for those interested to start testing the import of legacy IsoDraw files. It is not turned on by default. If you would like to participate in that, please reach out through your Arbortext team to find out more information on how you can participate with being able to test, not for production, test importing IsoDraw files into Creo Illustrate and see, what is working with your content what some of the gaps might still be, that kind of thing. But, in that context, it's almost more for you to tell me, is there enough functionality there that you could replace ISO DrawCAD process with Creo Illustrate? We are obviously getting closer and closer, and that is one of the benchmarks we're looking at, was what do we need to at least be able to import a legacy ISO draw file and not have it fall apart. Things like multiple leader lines to a single call out, all the layering and grouping and structuring and colors and pen styles and all of that kind of stuff has been part of that journey to get to a place where you can make that decision for yourself. Have we, PTC, added enough capability that it makes sense for you to make that migration or not? Is there more stuff that you need? But we are getting very close. Potentially with Creo Illustrate 13, which would be April, May timeframe, we may be able to turn on the ISODraw import capability in Creo Illustrate Professional as part of the out-of-the-box capability. Now, to go back to your question, though, that doesn't necessarily mean it's ready for you or your company, but a lot of it is there, and you could potentially start taking advantage of it. I know that was kind of long-winded, but hopefully that answered your question. All right. Next one up. So this one, transparent background option for shaded images in a 2D figure. So this is basically what it sounds like. If you collapse from 3D to 2D, one of the options you have is to include a shaded image, or in essence, the render style from the 3D window as a raster background for what you're seeing in the 2D. And that's the background image you're seeing here. What this does is it allows you now to specify that you want that background image, the alpha channel, to be transparent. So basically everything that's base white would become transparent. Where you might use this is if you're, say, exporting to an SVG file and you're then incorporating that into another document, an HTML page or whatever it might be, and you want to be able to form the text around it and that kind of stuff without that white square interfering with other things that might be around the image that you're trying to embed. So with the SVG, you can have, maintain the nice crisp lines, have the color raster image, and still be able to create whatever you want without having to worry about, is the image in front of or behind the text and that kind of thing. So that's one of the use cases for this particular piece. Now, this one is, again, trying to bring 2D up to the same level of capability as 3D, minus the Z-axis, of course. This now incorporates 2D in the context of being able to participate in localization, especially like if you're using Windchill Service Information Manager and you're using the localization capability in it. This can now participate in that function, even with the 2D content. So, and you can even preview this. These are snapshots directly out of Creo Illustrate, just choosing different languages to show, and all the labels and everything will respond accordingly. So that is another enhancement, again, along that road of enhancing the 2D functionality to get it to where we need to be to give you the freedom to choose what makes the most sense, 2D or 3D, or both. We have plenty of companies now that are actually creating both content and allowing the end consumer of the information to choose for themselves. Do they just need a static 2D image, or do they want live interactable 3D content, that kind of thing? So with that, I will open it up for other general questions related to Creo Illustrate, assuming there are any. Has anybody seen anything they find would be useful? Any other news in the area of wind chill integration? So there is a new effort going on. It was talked about at PTC User back in January. It's still ongoing. This particular capability is geared around being able to do process planning or structured content authoring directly inside of Creo Illustrate with content from Windchill. Now, the initial push is in the realm of process plans for manufacturing. But the larger view of that is that it's structured content. And so, as part of that, and as integrated as we are with the Arbortext team, as far as Creo Illustrate is concerned, we are also looking at how might I use that same capability to say, open a data topic directly into Creo Illustrate and be able to create figures and whatnot while seeing, the instruction part, so to speak, the written instruction that would go along with it, and be able to create links directly between the text and the graphic and that kind of stuff, and then move that information back. There are also other efforts to bring more of the workflow directly into Creo Illustrate itself. So like if somebody's tasked you with work to do, it would be nice to be able to see that without necessarily needing to go into Windchill to see that, to then open something into Creo Illustrate, that kind of thing. So there are other efforts in that regard as far as, I guess you could say, kind of blurring that line of you're either in Creo Illustrate or you're in Windchill. We want to make it a bit more focused on what is it you're doing and how can we help with that. Another aspect of that is, how do I, create a parts list and have it populate the necessary information back into Windchill so that there's, you're not doing it as a two-step function. You're kind of just doing it as you create the exploded state. We're creating the parts list dynamically, and it's all just done as a single operation, as opposed to creating a parts list in Windchill and loading that into Creo Illustrate, creating the exploded state and loading that back, that kind of thing. So it'd be a bit more comprehensive. Let me see. You guys are writing all kinds of questions. I need to scroll just a minute. So next one. Will this be broadcast? Oh, will this broadcast be shared? I believe this ends up on YouTube in the Arbortext channel. Justin may be able to directly say when that is. Yeah, he just confirmed with me that it will be uploaded onto YouTube. Let's see. Hey, Richard. Crisp lines in a 2D image you mentioned, are they very crisp? That depends on how much resolution you have on your screen, and whether or not, of course, the word just escaped me. It's not tessellation. It's the the effect that smooths the edges of the line. For some reason, my mind is drawing a blank on the actual term. Um, but you need to make sure that you have some of those things on. Like if you output to SVG, in essence, what's in the SVG file is the points between the lines or at the ends of the lines. And it's up to whatever's actually rendering those lines. If you're talking about, is it going in, are the lines going into a raster image, then that is going to be affected by, do you have the anti-aliasing, and I just remember the word, turned on or not? And what your resolution is that you're going to, and the size of the image and all of that kind of stuff will have an impact on how crisp those lines are. And the format even. Like TIFF generally has crisper lines in that regard than, say, a JPEG or a PNG file because of the way that the TIFF is structured and that kind of thing. Any enhancements with schematics? Not yet. Oh, my window just really scrolled. We are looking at a few things. One of the first things that will be coming in that regard, though, is, and for those that are not aware, we are in the process of building a web version of Creo View. The first release of that will be in October of this year, along with Windchill 13.1.2. Later in the fourth calendar quarter of the year, we will be providing CPSs for Windchill 13.02 and 12.1.2 to allow those versions of Windchill to be able to use Creo View Web. Now, as part of that, on that roadmap is in essence the ability to be able to consume all of the Creo Illustrate content. That includes the cross-selection highlighting capability between schematic and 3D image and that kind of thing. So that's one of the first things. We want to get this new viewer to the point that it can support what Creo Illustrate can output already before we start adding more stuff and potentially putting Creo View Web a little bit further behind. But we are looking into what capabilities make the most sense and going back through and looking at all the requests that we've had over the years as to what we should be working on next. But right now there isn't anything other than a web-capable playback is on the roadmap. Iffy as far as it being available in 2026. What is PTC's plan to utilize the product? Not sure I understand what's labeled to me as question 7. That was from Brian. So I'm really interested in the raster background in a 2D, i.e. colors and nice crisp lines would be nice. If you have any examples, please. Basically only the one that's shown here. Where's my mouse? The data set that I have set up. It's, a lot of it, again, you have the ability to specify, like even for that background image, what's the resolution, what's the pixels per inch. The higher the resolution, the higher it can go. The crispness of the black lines, that's going to be affected by the format you output to. As far as, is it a JPEG, a PNG, a TIFF, something else? If your focus is the crisp black lines, TIFF is probably the better way to go. If your focus is ultra small files, then you can play around with quality levels to find that balance point for you with either JPEG or PNG. Let's see. This list keeps jumping around. let's see. Can the direction of explode lines be adjusted to just two, such as XYX or ZYZ, instead of always covering all three directions, or being only a direct line? Parts are rarely exploded in all three axes at a time. To my knowledge at the moment, it follows, in essence, a grid path. So if it's not a straight line from A to B, then it's going to follow the primary axes of the 3D space itself. And if you're off axis in one of those three, then it's going to dogleg along that axis. So if like this yoke number 4 here, if I just brought it up and then further out, well, it would only dogleg through the two axes. But if I brought it up and over and out, then it would give me 3. You're welcome, Richard. It would be useful to show the parts only exploded in the insets, but yes. So one of the things that we're working on, I don't have a timeline for when it would be released, is in essence, the idea of figure in figure. So this is to actually do a few things. One, you would be able to embed another figure with a completely different setup inside of an inset. It would also allow you to, in essence, put multiple figures together in like a 4-cell, 6-cell, whatever you wanted to lay out in, a parent figure, and be able to have some of those cells animated, some of them not animated, that kind of thing. So the direction that we're looking at there is more of a sort of the picture in picture you might see with some televisions, where you can actually bring in an image from another figure and be able to show it inside of that inset view. And that looks to be the last question. So what is the plan to utilize artificial intelligence in our products? So the approach that I'm taking with that is I'm addressing, as we had come up with problems, so to speak, we're looking at what's the best tool to solve that. One of the first things we want to look at is in the context of writing instructions. Now, when I talked about the structured content authoring inside of Creo Illustrate, one of the contexts there is, in essence, the ability to understand what you're doing. So like if I drag 8 bolts from one structure and I drag them into a step, well, if I've said this is an assembly process, more specifically to the manufacturing context, if this is an assembly process, I can assume that's being installed. We also don't want you to have to animate that or explode that even. So how can we leverage, algorithms, whether it's AI or our own interference engine or compare engines or whatever the case may be? How can we leverage that to not require exploded or animated content? And what I mean by that is, so I put the parts in a step, and if I can assume that it's being installed, well, the person consuming the information can then say, what level of help do they actually need? For some people, it's just a checklist. They don't even need an image. They do it all the time. They just need a reminder of torque values, or, this is the order you should do it in. Others, could want a fully animated augmented reality experience because they've never even seen this before. You shouldn't have to author for each of those use cases and all the ones in between. So if we can understand using algorithms how this goes together and comes apart, you're just defining the step, and we can say, okay, you've added these parts into this step and you've said it's assembly, so we can write out, install 8 each bolt, part number such and such. And if you're doing MBD and that the information for the torque value is in there because the engineer was kind enough to provide it, we can even put that in too. And all you did was drag the 8 bolts and say, these are the bolts I want to use in the step. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at. Others are in the realm of, you being able to ask, in this case, Creo Illustrate a question, how do I do something? And it be able to tell you how you do it. This is what you would do. Others have to do with more broad scale, like, PTC scale, where I want to know more information about yoke number 4. And it could find that information in Windchill or potentially an ERP system and whatnot, and return that information to you directly in Creo Illustrate so that you could better understand the part if that was what your intention is. So those are some of the things that we're looking at in that regard. The more focused ones are, in essence, the automated instruction authoring components to reduce the workload. So, it's on the author / illustrator to say, these are the parts that need to be used in this step. And we try to figure out, or at least write you the draft of what we interpreted you saying needed to happen. Now, there's always going to be cases like, in this one here, there's the real instruction. There's actually some silicone that goes in here too. That's not in the model. So there would always be cases where you would have to go in and say, oh, and this is here. Now in the MBD, they might have pointed out that there's silicone that needs to go in there to make a better oil tight environment. If they didn't, though, you might have to add that piece of information and that kind of stuff. So, and that's why we want to do some of that in Creo Illustrate, because we know automatic doesn't always get it right. And you're going to need the tools to correct it or create from scratch, depending on the level of information available in your models or in the source data that you're consuming, that kind of thing. So, but that's the perspective in the Creo Illustrate context. So as far as there's a question, so Arbortext will be sunset and Illustrate 13 will be PT's go forward tool? No. So Arbortext has a significant amount of capability for those that need absolute control of everything. Creo Illustrate is not doing that. So, you might be able to open a data topic or something that represents that and, correct some text and things like that, but you're not going to author a data topic from scratch, that kind of thing. So going back to the question from before, when will Creo Illustrate be in a position to replace IsoDraw CAD process? That's another, this question as far as which is the better tool for you, Arbortext or Creo Illustrate? What's your use case? We're not doing this to replace a particular tool. We're doing this to try to pull workflows together. To be quite honest, we want to get to the point where you don't even care about file formats. The data flows end to end, and it works. But we understand that not everybody is in that position. We also understand that there are decades of XML data out there that are very specific and whatnot that may not work in this process. So we're not sunsetting anything. We're not sunsetting IsoDraw. There's no dates for any of that. You know, the market will tell us what they need, what they want to use, and when they want to use it. That's not something that we're deliberately saying. So I think that all the questions. All right. Well, if that's it, I think we can go ahead and break a bit early. Hopefully, everyone got something out of this. Lots of good questions at the end. So, with that, a big thanks to everyone, and we'll see you at the next one.